Well, today the PM has been grilled on his government's sports rorts scandal at the National Press Club in Canberra. Scott Morrison's speech focused on emergency management and climate change after a horror early start to Australia's bushfire season. With more, Canberra Sky News reporter David Shiraz.
The Prime Minister's pitch for 2020 after 2019 closed in controversy.
It is important to understand not just what we're doing as a government, but why we are doing it.
In his first major speech for the year, Scott Morrison stood firm against his critics and defended his climate credentials, insisting that any criticism of his government's future use of Kyoto carryover credits is hypocritical.
It was the Labor government that made carryover credits a condition of their signing up to the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. So I'm not topping lectures from that lot.
The global assessment of Australia is that we are ranked right at the bottom in terms of climate change action. That's actually what this government is about.
Taking the words of protesters outside to come up with a new slogan.
The climate action we need now. Building dams, developing new crop varieties, improving planning for natural disasters is climate action now.
A crucial component to his climate action, increasing Australia's access to domestic gas supplies, with Victoria and Tasmania both persisting with fracking bans.
Gas has a critical role to play. We've got to get the gas.
From climate change to the bushfire battle, Mr Morrison again insisting that action should include a national standard for hazard reduction and a transparency register for all jurisdictions conducting reduction burns.
We've got to be comparing apples with apples. We've got to be using the same methodologies.
And reiterating the need to ensure the Army can be called out by the Commonwealth when needed during a national disaster without an invitation from the states.
There is now a clear community expectation that the Commonwealth should have the ability to respond in times of national emergency.
All that's required to roll out the Australian Defence Force and to maximise all of the resources that are at the disposal of the national government is something called leadership. It doesn't need legislation.
When the Prime Minister's speech concluded and the questions began, the focus returned to the sports rorts saga, as the Prime Minister awaits the findings of a report into whether Bridget McKenzie violated the ministerial standards by favouring marginal seats over merit when allocating taxpayer-funded grants.
This is a serious matter. I'm taking it seriously.
But rejecting suggestions that the allocation of grants to groups in targeted electorates had been self-serving.
As a matter of principle, do you accept that it's wrong to use public funds for your own private and political benefit?
Well, that's not what the government has done.
I'm asking if, as a matter of principle, if you accept that.
Well, well, of course. I mean, that's like, you know, do I believe the sun should rise tomorrow? Yes, I do.
David Shiraz, Sky News, Canberra.
Well, the focus of the nation and the world might well be on the deadly coronavirus. It was an important day, as I said, for the government. Scott Morrison delivered his 2020 opening address to the National Press Club in Canberra. The Herald Sun's investigative journalist James Campbell joins me now from Melbourne to discuss this and more. Welcome to the show, James. Great to have you here with us. I'll get to coronavirus in a moment. Let's start with the PM's speech. Very strong on a number of issues. More Commonwealth, or the potential of more Commonwealth controls for disaster management, not having to be waited to be invited in by the states, as we saw examples of this over the summer period. But also, I think, interestingly, some pretty strong words in relation to energy and the issue of climate change, adaptation, preparedness and other things, not just the dogma of the debate. What did you make overall of his address today?
I think that the call-out powers question is a bit of a distraction, really. I mean, does anybody imagine for a second that if the Commonwealth forces were needed, that a state government would prevaricate on this? Can
I just jump in there? Yes, I can, because I know the circumstance of the Lindt siege. There's intricacies in reports that are publicly known, but the availability of a state police sniper, a better option was a commando, an army commando just down the road at Holdsworthy. It was knocked back repeatedly by the New South Wales State Premier. So, yeah, I can see why you'd want to sometimes force the defence capability on state premiers.
Well, but that's, I mean, that's a rather different scenario, isn't it, to a bushfire? I mean, is the federal government going to be grabbing hold of crime scenes? I mean, that's academic anyway, because I mean, if something like the Lynch Sledge had happened in Melbourne, there's nothing that the Commonwealth could have done because, as you say, all the snipers are in Holsworthy. But as for the climate change stuff, I think it was good. He has essentially attempted to reframe the debate as, yeah, we're about climate change. We accept climate change is happening. We're about mitigating it. But we're not really going to talk about the causes of that. That's another problem for another day. We're going to talk about what we can do to deal with what is happening to us. It is a big concession from the government that the impact of climate change has arrived now. But it's a very clever kind of pivot away from the question of emissions to what we can do about what is happening on the ground in the country. I think it will be a big win for his constituency. It's not going to satisfy the people outside the building who are chanting, but I think if they can stick to the narrow path that we accept climate change is happening, but there's nothing really much we can do about it. What we've got to concentrate on is how we mitigate its risks and the dangers that we face in Australia. Then he could be on a winner here.
I think it fits with very much his political pitch today. This is practical Scott, bridging the line between moderates and the hardline Conservatives, somewhere with a bob each way, more on the Conservative right, to be fair to the PM. He had this to say on the issue of climate change today. I pulled it out because I thought he's really gone to the nub of the issue. It's about the practical responses rather than the esoteric chat about Paris. Let's have a listen.
Hazard reduction is even more important than emissions reduction. We need to seriously engage with issues like how we manage native vegetation, how we allow landowners to clear asset protection zones on their property where they're stymied, where we allow structures to be built and how, the materials and standards they are built to, and where and when hazard reduction burns or other hazard reduction practices are carried out. All these considerations have a direct impact on the safety of Australians living in this climate and in this bush environment. That is why I've said it's important that we have greater transparency and accountability nationally about action being taken to reduce these risks and manage these going forward in a changing climate. All of this is the climate action we need now. Building dams, developing new crop varieties, improving planning for natural disasters is climate action now.
And look, you know, I think by honing this message about hazard reduction and practical changes, James, we look at the case of Victoria last year. 2/3 of what was required to be burnt in hazard burn reduction, planned burns, planned under the 2009 Royal Commission recommendations, was not met. He's turning the tables, or attempting to turn the tables here, back on state governments. Do you think that's going to work?
Oh, maybe. I mean, if you believe in this stuff, surely the way to deal with it is to empower people locally. Moving the decision on what can be burnt to Canberra strikes me as a somewhat strange way of going about things.
No, I think, to be fair, when I spoke to him the other night, it was about the reporting and the transparency and the target setting being at a national level, but the action and the accountability of staying where it is.
There's no question the Victorian government down here has got questions to answer about its decision to junk the targets in the Royal Commission. They made the case at the time that they needed to, it was simply unfeasible. They couldn't carry out that much burning, because of climate change, among other reasons. That the burning season, the off-season, is getting shorter and shorter. There was a fire down here when a controlled burn got out of control that turned into an uncontrolled fire, and they made the decision, we'll just move to strategic asset protection. Problem is, of course, that the fuel loads reached such an extraordinary level in areas that they weren't burning that they essentially ran over areas that had been controlled burns. So, we really do need to have a serious look at what we do about this. And the Victorian government, as I said, has got questions to answer here. How much we burn in winter in this country is going to be a debate that we're going to have. The Greenies can't have their way on that, but it's you
can't convince me. I mean, Indigenous Australians have been burning for 60,000 years with far less fire technology that we have available to ourselves now. I think we're finding excuses left, right and centre. We make excuses, put in laws to stop farmers looking after their own properties, and now the reach of law and regulations got out of control and we're paying for it this summer. I want to move on to something else. How do you think Bridget McKenzie, is she going to do a Houdini act and get out of this so that next week she's in the Parliament, still in her cabinet position, still there as Deputy Leader of the Nationals, or is her head on the chopping block?
Well, if she was a Liberal, she'd be gone, let's be frank. She wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be going through this convoluted process. She would have just been, tapped. The problem is, of course, she's not a Liberal. She's a member of the National Party. They are a separate party room. They've got they feel their own sort of, powers, and they don't like being told what to do. She's also the Deputy Leader of the National Party, which makes it complicated because, as we know, she doesn't hold that position with the universal acclamation of her National Party colleagues. So, you pull the sort of the rod out, it's a game of pick-up sticks, here. You take her out and the whole power structure inside the National Party room could, shift. There's no coming back for her, the public figure of Bridget McKenzie, star of the National Party. I mean, clearly that's over. She's now going to be, like Ros Kelly, essentially remembered for one thing. And, the government doesn't need her around at the moment, causing it problems. If she was thinking about the best interests of the government, she would have resigned already, wouldn't she? Mm. I mean, how is this going to get better?
I think some in the government, like the Nats, would hope this will blow over. You're out in the street. You're in a key target market in Victoria. How much does this cut through, do you think?
It's cut through big time. People, because when the list of people of clubs that missed out came out, and the list of people who got the money, $500,000 for a hockey club in Hawthorn and Malvern that's in Kooyong. I mean, friends of mine who are not in politics are just rolling their eyes. It damages people's perception of the way in which their money's spent.
Well, look, you're absolutely right. Any appeal for funds from a footy club or a netball club over the next little period, everyone will be thinking, well, but for her, I wouldn't, Mum and Dad, have to dip into my pockets to send my kids off to a sports camp or something. Just before we go, because we're going to run out of time, Friday's a big day. I know you're a Brexit man. You're thoroughly interested in the ins and outs of British politics. What are you going to do to celebrate? Or will you even be celebrating, James?
I'm one of those people who was actually pro at the time. I thought, oh, good on them. Now I'm just very nervous about what sort of deal they ultimately land on with Brexit. And I've actually been, the thing I've been concentrating most on over there at the moment, which has really upset me and disturbed me, is the UK government's decision against the best advice in the world to press on with letting Huawei into the 5G network there, and which is going to, which has got everybody here, Labor and Liberal, who follow this space, absolutely scratching their heads.
Couldn't agree more. I'll have to leave it there. I'll have something to say about Huawei when we get back after the break. James Campbell, thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome.